I'm Stephanie, and welcome to the Reading Room. This is the playlist where I review what I read in the last month, and I'm going to do my best to keep it spoiler-free, or at least warn you if I'm going to spoil something. And as I say in all my reviews, these are solely about the books, not about the authors as people. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk about the books that I read in the first month of 2024. Alright, first up we have Look Closer by David Ellis, which has been sitting on my 2023 to-be-read pile for forever, and so I really wanted to start this year off with a bang, so it was my first read of the year, as this had been hyped all over Bookstagram, so I really had to check it out. But let's go ahead and see what the book promised to be about. Simon and Vicky couldn't seem more normal. A wealthy Chicago couple with a stable, if unexciting, marriage. But with these two, absolutely nothing is what it seems. When a beautiful socialite is found hanging in a mansion in a nearby suburb, Simon and Vicky's complex web of secrets begins to unravel. A whirlwind affair, a $20 million trust fund about to come due, a decades-long grudge, and an obsession with revenge. These are just a few of their lies with devastating consequences. Both Vicky and Simon are liars. But just who exactly is conning who? Prepare to question everything you think you know in this wickedly clever novel of greed, revenge, obsession, and quite possibly, the perfect murder. So I can totally see why this was hyped. This was a fantastic read. I was so engaged with this, and I really loved every minute of this suspenseful read. I'm so glad that I kicked off 2024 with this book, as it was such a good mystery. I think Ellis does a really good job of dropping hints and bombshells in all the right places and at the right time, so I sped right through this. I also thought it was really well plotted, and every reveal had me questioning what was going on and make me essentially look closer. Everything fit, and it was just so satisfying to see how the cons were stacking up and who was playing who. This is the type of cat and mouse plot that I expected from You Shouldn't Have Come Here, but this actually pulled it off, and it did it so well. I will say I was getting a bit worried near the end that it would start to veer into a ridiculous twist or a gotcha moment from Ellis, as the plot does get quite complex, but he delivered a great ending that really brought everything home and tied everything up really nicely. While reading this, I didn't quite know who to trust or root for, as everyone kind of had some dark shades of gray to their personality. Nothing is what it seems, and I was addicted to figuring out what was really going on, but the book was always a step or two ahead of me. Again, with every reveal, I was like, I did not see that coming. And I just had to keep reading the book. If I had any criticisms, it would just be that some of the formatting threw me off a little bit. We'll have a section of a scene and then a break, but then it's still somewhat the same scene. But if that's the only negative that I have to take away from this, that is so minor and truly did not detract from my reading experience. I've also seen some reviews that said it was a really slow start and they didn't really get invested until about 20% in. I didn't notice that. That wasn't a problem for me, but that might be something that you might pick up on, and if you do, I promise you it gets so good. Just keep going. I gave this 5 stars. Go read this if you haven't already, and honestly, try to go in as blind as possible. That's honestly why I'm not saying much in this review, because it was such a great read, and I don't want to let anything slip. The hype is real, my friends, on this book. Alright, second book of January was Every Last Fear by Alex Finlay. Finlay, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that name. This one was also on my 2023 to be read, and I've had this on my mind for quite a long time now, and finally bit the bullet and was able to get it from the book outlet for super cheap. I think it was less than $7. I mean, I was entering Goodreads giveaways to get my hands on a copy, but never got one, so finally just went out and bought one for myself. But let's see what the book promised and why I was so intrigued in getting my hands on this. They found the bodies on a Tuesday. So begins this twisty and breathtaking novel that traces the fate of the Pine family, a thriller that will both leave you on the edge of your seat and move you to tears. After a late night of partying, NYU student Matt Pine returns to his dorm room to devastating news. Nearly his entire family, his mom, his dad, his little brother, and sister, have been found dead from an apparent gas leak while vacationing in Mexico. The local police claim it was an accident, but the FBI and State Department seem far less certain, and they won't tell Matt why. The tragedy makes headlines everywhere because this isn't the first time the Pine family has been thrust into the media spotlight. Matt's older brother, Danny, currently serving a life sentence for the murder of his teenage girlfriend, Charlotte, was the subject of a viral true crime documentary suggesting that Danny was wrongfully convicted. Though the country has rallied behind Danny, Matt holds a secret about his brother that he's never told anyone. The night Charlotte was killed, Matt saw something that makes him believe his brother is guilty of the crime. When Matt returns to his small hometown to bury his parents and siblings, he's faced with a hostile community that was villainized by the documentary, a frenzied media, and memories he'd hoped to leave behind forever. Now, as the deaths in Mexico appear increasingly suspicious, Matt must unearth the full truth about his family's final days, putting his own life in peril. Told through multiple points of view and alternating between past and present, Every Last Fear is not only a page-turning thriller, it's also a poignant story about a family managing heartbreak and tragedy and living through a fame they never wanted. So all in, this is a pretty good read and a pretty good debut, but it was a bit of a change of pace coming off of Ellis's book. In this, there were some things that I questioned that just kind of wouldn't work given today's technology, though most of those points, I guess, were addressed later in the book. Let's just say you should suspend some disbelief here for a bit and be ready for a convoluted and complex plot. I will say the writing was good, and the reveals also came at the right time to keep me turning the pages. I did like the relationship our detective Sarah Keller, who's investigating everything, had with her husband and stay-at-home dad, Bob. I thought he did a good job of balancing her, and I really liked that they had a healthy relationship instead of the stereotypical, I don't have time for relationships detective types. He made her laugh, he supported her and her career, and he seemed like a genuinely good guy. I just thought it was a really nice touch, again, compared to other thrillers I've read where, yeah, these people's relationships are just garbage. I also really liked Matt's sister, Maggie. She was logical, used her head, and wasn't afraid to use other body parts of hers in self-defense. It's just a shame that she had such a bright future ahead of her, and it was taken over something that it shouldn't have been taken over. Now, our main character, Matt, I liked Matt, but I also felt like I didn't really know him or understand the choices that he was making. I wanted to go deeper into his point of view, but we just kind of never did. We never really get inside his head, which was a real shame. Like, things that happened to him, they just happened to him, and then we're moving on to the next scene. Like, I don't know, give me some sort of reaction or introspection, my dude. And I feel awful for him. Awful that he has lost most of his family and to have to keep moving on after unraveling the truth about Danny. Like, I really hope Matt has some really good therapy. I do also wish we'd gotten more time with Danny or got to know him on a deeper level as well, and how he was handling everything. Like, losing his family and potentially being falsely imprisoned. Like, those are tough things to deal with. Like, why didn't we get some of his perspective in this? Like I already said, be ready to suspend your disbelief and be ready for some things to be just filler or somewhat distracting from the main plot. There are a few scenes in this that didn't really add much to the story, and I really don't know why they were included. The ending is also what docked some points from this read. It went into bad thriller territory with, you get a twist, and you get a twist, and you get a twist. The ending was not the best, which was a bummer because I was hooked in this book. I was really excited to see what was going on. I had my suspicions, and then we get the big reveal, and it was like, okay. It was just okay. And honestly, not paced well. It went really fast, and then we get kind of this small scene of a resolution with Matt afterward, and I wanted more. I also felt there was this weird undercurrent of anti-Mexican themes in this. Like, Mexico is described in really poor terms, and it's all dirty and gross and backwoods. Like, one detective says the authorities there don't even get good training. Like, really? We're in the 2020s, people. It really kept jumping out at me, and it was something that I didn't love. Like, I like Mexico. Mexico City was really neat, but my favorite destination, well, I guess my favorite top two, one is Tasco and the other is Teotihuacan. I think Mexico is a really fun travel destination, and it's not, I don't know, I didn't like the spin on it, and I could understand if it had come from like one character who's meant to kind of be this bad person. I felt like everyone was kind of in on this, ooh, let's crap on Mexico thing. Again, I like Mexico. Does it have its problems? Of course. But what country doesn't? It just felt very like, Mexico is bad and key. Like, I don't think that's a key message you want in a book. I didn't like it. There were a few other scenes that also jumped out to me as kind of having racist undertones. And to be fair, one was written specifically to be that way. A character is racist, and in the book it is treated as a bad thing. But there were other stereotypes and racist comments that were just sprinkled throughout without the glowing neon sign of like, this is not okay. But beyond that, there was plenty of good to work with here. This was a solid read and kept me engaged, especially, again, for a debut title. It was also a really quick one to get through, which I liked. I'm going to give it 3.5, maybe 4 stars. No, I'm going to give it 3.5, just because of that ending. I'm excited for the other book that I have by Finlay that's sitting on my to-be-read shelf, and can't wait to give his work another try. Alright, next up was 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. And I got this in one of my book buying sprees from, I think it was Barnes & Noble actually, as the idea of this was intriguing, and I've seen Swanson's name popping up on thriller lists, so I finally wanted to give him a try. So let's take a look and see what the book promised. Years ago, bookseller and mystery aficionado Malcolm Kershaw compiled a list of fiction's most unsolvable murders, which he titled 8 Perfect Murders. Chosen from among the best of the best, including Agatha Christie's The ABC Murders, Patricia Highsmith's Strangers on a Train, and Ira Levin's Death Trap. But no one is more surprised than Mal, now the owner of the Old Devil's bookstore in Boston, when an FBI agent comes looking for information about a series of unsolved murders that appear eerily similar to the killings on Mal's old list. And the agent isn't the only one interested in the bookseller. The killer is out there, watching his every move. A diabolical threat who knows way too much about Mal's personal history, especially the secrets he's never told anyone, even his recently deceased wife. To protect himself, Mal begins looking into possible suspects, and sees a killer in everyone around him. But Mal doesn't count on the investigation leaving a trail of death in its wake. Suddenly, a series of shocking twists leaves more victims dead, and the noose around Mal's neck grows so tight he might never escape. So to start, there are some things that are working here. The biggest is that it's a quick read. It's pretty small. There's also a really good feeling of atmosphere, and I enjoyed the settings. Like, the setting of the bookstore was fantastic and really well done. It had a good premise and a good setup. As someone who wrote some, like, stupid BuzzFeed-style list of books that feature perfect murders is actually carrying them out to send the writer of that list a message, it sounds really great. But mostly this was just kind of boring and slow. Like, there are threads that should have been pulled at more, or some of the red herrings never really got a resolution. We're mostly along for the ride as Mal just reads the books on his list, and the detective trying to figure out what's going on with this list, and Mal himself. It's just repetitive, and it feels slow for a book that could have a lot of action. And also, Mal doesn't seem that surprised or have any sense of urgency in solving who is targeting him with these murders. he kind of just keeps on keeping on and meanders around and lives his life and reads his books. There's not much tension in these pages. The ending was also a bit over the top for my taste, very much leaning into the I'm a villain and let me explain why. It wasn't only that, though. The writing style during the reveal kind of shifts. Like, we're in first-person point of view, which also didn't help as our main man kind of has to think in code or purposely not think about certain things so as to not ruin the big reveal. But then we get the reveal, and it's told to us. We hear bits and pieces from the villain, but it's mostly Mal, our narrator, telling us everything. Okay. I wasn't a huge fan of the info dump and like the whole here's what's going on and here's what really happened in the past. Okay, again, I get the use of the unreliable narrator thing in this, but it was almost just a bit too much like wink wink nudge nudge for my taste. Like, I get it, Malcolm is unreliable. I will say I didn't care that the plots of the books on his list were kind of spoiled as they're older books or have like broader pop culture reaches by now. But if you have any of the following books on your to be read list, do not read this before them because it will talk about everything that's in them. So that's the ABC Murders, Strangers on a Train, Death Trap, The Red House Mystery, Malice Aforethought, Double Indemnity, The Drowner, The Secret History, And Then There Were None, and The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. So if you're planning on reading any of those, read them before this because, again, they will talk about major plot points of that. All in, I'm thinking of giving this 3 stars as it held my interest for the most part, and I didn't hate it. It just wasn't as good as I was hoping it was going to be. There were good things and not so good things about this read. I already do have another Swanson book on my to-be-read shelf, so obviously I'm going to give him another try, and maybe that book will be a little bit better than this reading one. Again, this was very middle of the road. It's fine. If you're just looking for something to entertain you for a couple hours, this could be a really great read. Alright, next up is the Burnout by Sophie Kinsella, whom I absolutely adore and love, and as soon as I read the blurb of this book, I knew I had to go out and buy it and read it. So let's see what the book promised. Sasha has had it. She cannot bring herself to respond to another inane, urgent, but obviously not at all urgent, email or participate in the corporate employee joyfulness program. She hasn't seen her friends in months. Sex seems like a lot of effort. Even cooking dinner takes far too much planning. Sasha has hit a wall. Armed with good intentions to drink kale smoothies, try yoga, and find peace, she heads to the seaside resort she loved as a child. But it's the off-season. The hotel is a dilapidated shambles, and she has to share the beach with the resort's only other occupant, a grumpy guy named Finn who seems as stressed as Sasha. How can she commune with nature when he's sitting on her favorite rock, watching her? Nor can they agree on how best to alleviate their burnout. Sasha, manifesting, wild swimming. Finn, drinking whiskey, getting pizza delivered to the beach. When curious messages, seemingly addressed to Jesus, I don't know why I can't say this name. I had a dog named Sasha growing up, which is also one of the things that stuck out to me. Like, I couldn't read her name without thinking of my little schnauzer. But that's a whole different point. Seemingly addressed to Sasha and Finn, begin to appear in the sand. The two are forced to talk about everything. How do they get so burned out? Can either of them remember something they used to love? Answer: surfing. And the question they try and fail to ignore: what does the energy between them, flaring even in the face of their bone-deep exhaustion, signify? Whew, so I really hate to say this, but this was not Kinsella's best work. I really struggled with this. This took me a week to read. And if I'm liking something like Look Closer, I will stay up until 4 a.m. to finish a book in one day if I love it. This took me a week because picking this up actually hurt my soul. And I'm sorry. I love you, Kinsella. I love you. But I did not love this. This was a big miss. A really, really bad miss. I did not like my time with this at all. And if you've never read Kinsella, please don't start with this, because this is not a good introduction to her work. I promise you, there are better works out there. It almost read like it was trying way too hard to be funny and create zany situations and characters. Like, the hotel she escapes to, she remembers it being, like, the place to go in Ralston Bay, and remembers her parents getting all, like, dressed up and glitzy for it, and it being a significant event. And then she gets there, and it's really, like, shabby, there's no furniture, and it seems like it's been in shambles for years, her window is boarded up. I didn't get it. What happened? Like, is this supposed to be funny? A lot of the characters weren't realistic either, or even honestly believable as human beings. Now, Kinsella is known for writing some wacky characters, and she typically does do that, and typically there's always something that offsets their wackiness so you can believe it. But here, this was too over the top even for me. I love her wacky characters, but God, I was getting secondhand embarrassment reading this. It was just ridiculous. Like, the whole cast at the hotel annoyed me. Like, minus the crypt keeper Herbert, I had no idea how old our hotel staff is supposed to be, and they were just way too involved in Sasha's life. And just, like, they barge into her room. I just didn't like it. Again, a lot of things felt really forced or over-exaggerated, like the humor and the mishaps, like, veered far too far into the absurd. It just didn't work for me where normally it does in Kinsella's other works. Like, I stuck by Shopaholic through the terrible ones that take place in the US, minus the New York one. That one's pretty good. But she was able to bring it back around. And then even last year's The Party Crasher that I read by her has zany situations. Like, there's a character hiding under a dining table or something. And, like, even then, I bought it and believed it. In this, it just didn't work. The other thing about this is it's slow. It is so slow, and I found myself getting bored with the book quite frequently. I was skimming probably the last 100 pages because I was just over it. There's also no reason that this book should be like 400 some pages. I think it might be 399, but you get what I mean. It's just, I was over it. The writing was kind of lazy and not great. Again, this is not her best. Even the romance aspect of this took way too long to get to. I was almost, I think, like 200 pages in and really considered DNFing this. I don't DNF a lot of books. And I persevered because I'm not a quitter, and I was giving Kinsella the benefit of the doubt. But after I finished it, I kind of wish I had just DNF'd. The romance aspect was slow to get to, and then it just didn't really work for me either. It was too slow at the beginning, and then bam, they're in love. Or something. I don't even know. And then, like many romances, it hinges on the characters refusing to communicate like adults. Like, Sasha bears most of the responsibility here and acts like such a child about her own assumptions. I mean, they're both to blame a little bit, but, like, my God, I wanted to reach into the book and shake Sasha. I just didn't like her. I connected with her at the beginning and thought, like, the beginning was pretty good with, like, the whole, like, startup BS culture, like the aspiration boards and the joyfulness programs. That was pretty funny. I understand that. But then she's just kind of there for the rest of the story. Like, there's this scene, you know, where she gets her big revelation and realization about her life. I had to reread that section, like, 3 times because I just didn't get it. What made her get this realization? What happened? How is this happening? I don't get it. I don't get it. I also expected her travel-based marketing background to play a much bigger role, especially when she shows up to the hotel and it's in shambles. But it didn't. It means nothing. So I will say Kinsella does tend to write similar characters, but it feels like Sasha kind of popped out of Uncanny Valley. Like, she's a mishmash of a bunch of Kinsella protagonists, but also not unique enough that she stands out on her own. Everything in this is so slow and then it just does like a 180, and it's just a full-on change. Character development, bam. Romance, bam. Plot points, bam. You got them. After 200 pages of nothing happening. Now, to give credit where credit is due, I do think the book did shine in the aspect of Sasha feeling nostalgic for the family vacations of her youth and being young and carefree and finding that childlike enthusiasm for life. And just the whole family aspect was really well written. I also appreciated another subplot on her old surfing teacher and what he taught her and what she's learning to take with her from those lessons. That was really nice. But the rest of this was not. This was 300 pages longer than it should have been. There are just so many subplots in this that don't really add much to the story. There's this whole artist in town, and then there's these mystery notes on the beach end up with the person just telling Sasha what's going on. She doesn't even put the clues together herself. Someone just sits her down and explains it all. What? Why? It's so dumb too, because the mystery is uninteresting and I just didn't care. I have to be honest, and even though it kills me, and again, I love Kinsella, I have to give this 2 stars. It pains me to no end to rate a beloved author's work so low, but this was just not it. This was bad. I cannot recommend this. If you want anything by Kinsella that was kind of along the same themes, I would go with 20s Girl, which if you want to borrow that from me, you're going to have to pry it out of my cold dead fingers. Or, again, I really like that read from her last year, The Party Crasher. That was cute, and more what I expect from her. I absolutely hate that this was such a bad read of January. It's just so depressing to have a favorite author betray me this way. I was just so disconnected from this. It was so far off from what I expect from Kinsella that it makes me wonder, was this a rush job and the editor got lazy? Or, Sophie, was this a cry for help? Do you yourself have burnout? I still love you, though, but I can't love this. All right, next up was One by One by Ruth Ware, which has also been on my to-be-read for a while now. I took January as a good month to make a good dent on the 24 books I want to read in 2024 that were carryovers from 2023, and I have enjoyed Ware's work in the past, so let's go ahead and see what this one promised. Getting snowed in at a luxurious, rustic ski chalet high in the French Alps doesn't sound like the worst problem in the world, especially when there's a breathtaking vista, a full-service chef and housekeeper, a cozy fire to keep you warm, and others to keep you company. Unless that company happens to be 8 coworkers, each with something to gain, something to lose, and something to hide. So, Look Closer, I think this one held up to the hype that I'd seen on it. I really liked this. Will say I did guess who was behind everything kind of early on, but I wasn't mad about it, and even when they get to their villain monologue, it actually kind of worked in this. Normally I don't really like when killers sit people down to explain why they do the things they do, but in this, the settings and all the conflicts that were happening gave them the time to have them explain, and it worked in this because we needed to hear it. The characters didn't have to pull a Zach Morris, time out to the action happening to do the exposition dump. It just worked naturally, and I appreciated that. The book is tense and has just enough thrills and is well paced as the stakes keep ramping up. The deaths also worked really well in this, and I felt like they could happen. And I also think the action was done well in this as well. I think maybe my only criticism is the settings. The overall setting was great, but I couldn't really picture the chalet they were in, nor the ski slopes and the lifts. There's this whole complicated explanation of the resort's lift system, and whew, it went right over my head. And I'm a skier, but I did not understand what was going on here. I just couldn't picture a lot of the settings for these scenes, minus the ones that happen in the kitchen and around the fireplace in the living room. Those I had a clear picture of. Everything else, Okay, I lied. I have a second thing that didn't work. The tech company part. It should have been a minor thing, as it's literally just the setup for the novel. But all the 8 coworkers work at this tech company on an app, but this app really bugged me. And it just bugged me because after it was explained, I'm like, would people even use this? Like, how does this thing make money? Like, I wouldn't use it, but I digress. Again, it's a minor point, but it's something that just, since they kept talking about it, I was like, I don't know, mate. I don't get it. Going back to the good things, the characters were distinct, which was good as we have a pretty big cast of characters, though I do think we probably could have trimmed the guest list down 1 or 2 characters as they didn't really serve a purpose or have much action or act as a red herring. But again, I do think everyone was unique enough that I could keep everyone straight and knew who they were, even if they were pretty quiet. I actually don't really want to say much else as this was a good read and something I definitely recommend. I'm giving this 4 out of 5 stars as I had to keep picking it back up and read it as fast as I could. I think this would be a really good vacation read or one to take on a ski weekend. I actually told my husband that now I'm pretty bummed that we didn't buy our ski passes this year as the book is really making me miss the slopes and skiing. Obviously not the death portion, but that's life, I guess. I would definitely recommend this one if you're looking for a locked room thriller with like a cold, wintry mountain backdrop. It was pretty good. All right, last is When I'm Dead by Hannah Morrissey, and this was an add-on to one of my Book of the Month orders as the premise sounded pretty great. So let's go ahead and see what it promised. On a bone-chilling October night, medical examiner Rowan Winthorpe investigates the death of her daughter's best friend. Hours later, the tragedy hits even closer to home when she makes a devastating discovery. Her daughter, Chloe, is gone, but not without a trace. A morbid mosaic of clues forces Rowan and her husband to question how deeply they really know their daughter. As they work closely to peel back the layers of this case, they begin to unearth disturbing details about Chloe and her secret transgressions, details that threaten to tear them apart. Amid the noise of navigating her newfound grief and reconciling the sins of her past, an undeniable fact rings true for Rowan. Karma has finally come to collect. So, I feel like I'm in the minority here. I didn't like this. This was really boring. Rowan is constantly thinking about how Chloe missing and probably already being dead is karma. It's karma coming to collect. The universe is out to get Rowan and doing it by taking her daughter. It's karma. Then we find out why Rowan thinks that, and the reasoning fell really flat for me. She just keeps harping on and on about it, and it just felt really forced. Like, girl, the universe don't care that much about you. Plus, Rowan is constantly jumping to these wild conclusions and zeroing in on anyone that she can deem a suspect. Actually, both her and her husband Axel do this, and it was annoying AF. Like, they are both absolutely sure that they have the right person of interest and are ready to kill them, and then a new suspect arrives, and they are absolutely sure that it's them now. Like, Axel needs some training, as he's a police officer, he's an investigator, and his own ability to jump to these crazy conclusions, and he's always ready to rough anyone up. That's not a good trait for him to have as someone who upholds the law. Also, there is no way in hell he would be allowed to investigate his daughter's case or anyone she's close to. He flies off the handle at the smallest provocation. No way he'd be allowed anywhere near this, especially after the behaviors he displays toward the people he's questioning. And Rowan wouldn't be allowed to be involved either. She's the medical examiner. Like, she's too close to home. Just the suspension of disbelief required for this book is a lot. And it honestly was just too outlandish for my taste. I'm also going to say there is a random, and I mean very random, sex scene in this between Axel and Rowan. I don't even care if that's a spoiler. Especially since it's following a scene that shouldn't have turned either of them on or lead to sexy times. It was really jarring to me. Like, as soon as it started, I was like, this is what we're doing? Like, eeh. So Chloe's missing, and the next door neighbor has a daughter about the same age, Libby. The character of Libby could have been interesting. But all I know about her is she's fat and creepy. But she's fat. It's very important that we know that she's fat. I don't know why it's so important, but it is. And then, yeah, she's just creepy. We get a point of view from her for most of the book, and then she kind of just drops off the face of the earth and then comes back at the end. I don't know if that was just bad editing or the author didn't know what fully to do with her. But again, it's constantly emphasized that she's fat and weird. And then one of the things that makes her weird is she takes taxidermy as an elective. Do most high schools offer that? Like, this is set in Wisconsin, and I grew up right next door. None of the high schools in my town offered this as a class. I mean, I guess I'll give the book some credit, as I think the school is supposed to be like a private academy. So I guess that's how that works, but I also don't get the whole private academy portion either. This town, Black Harbor, is so run down and dangerous and basically unsafe to even breathe in. But kids can come and go as they please, and there's a private school that has like 400 students. Okay. I got so bored of the repetition of how terrible and gross and awful Black Harbor is. Then move! My God. I did see a review on Goodreads by a reviewer named Rachel, and she summed it up beautifully. Black Harbor is a bad place. A very bad place. The worst place ever. This is repeated so many times that I felt like Batman needed to show up and free it of the crime. It's almost cartoonish how awful this town is described as. And a lot of the red herrings were very obvious red herrings. They come out of nowhere and do nothing but prolong the story. Like, the scenes with the red herrings were supposed to be tense, but I'm just sitting there thinking, like, I know it's not you. What are you doing? Why is Rowan freaking out over talking to you about nothing? So the red herrings come out of nowhere. It kind of felt like the villain came out of nowhere. And then at the end, the ending made me laugh. It really made me laugh, and it's not supposed to. It's not funny. The villain's monologue and behavior is just so over the top that I couldn't buy it. There's also like this big climactic action scene. I couldn't understand what was happening because I don't think the writing was very good. I just knew some people were like throwing punches and kicks, and I'm like, I have absolutely no idea what's going on here. And the villain is basically just like, hoo-hoo, I'm evil and here's why. I was dying while reading it because I was just so over this book. And again, at least after the villain's monologue, it was over. It was done. I saw some other reviewers point this out, and I really have to agree with them. Morrissey likes to use her thesaurus. We get it. You're smart. You know big words. But it really pulled me out of the story. It didn't read authentic to the characters that they're using these words. So the best comparison I can come up with is I love Frasier. I have watched every season probably like 9 times. And it'd be like if Marty, Frasier's dad, started using Frasier or Niles' vocabulary. Like, there were multiple instances of someone referencing something as Tishan. I think that's how it's pronounced. And it means, like, reddish brown. Just say she has auburn hair. Like, Christ on a cracker. To give credit where it's due, I did think the finding of the bodies was written really well, and it's creepy, and there is an interesting mystery that wants to be in this. But those few and far in between scenes were not enough to carry this. There's not much happening, and I was just so bored. It just got so repetitive and drags on and on and on. I do think that, again, the bones are here for a good book, and if maybe like another subplot or mystery element had been added, or at least another round of edits, this really could have been a good book. But as it stands, I did not enjoy my time with this. I also didn't know that this was book 3 in a series until I started looking at other reviews to see if like I was the only one that wasn't getting this or not liking this. But I don't think you need to read the other 2 first. There were some things that I felt I was missing like some context on, but not enough that I couldn't follow the plot or the characters. Originally, I was going to give this 3 stars, as it's somewhat fine. But seeing as I had to force myself to finish this, and again, just I was laughing while reading the ending because it's so cartoony. So this is dropping down to a 2 out of 5 stars read. I'm sure I'm going to give Morrissey another try in the future, but she may not make a comeback until 2025. All right, that wraps up everything that I read in January. If you have any recommendations of like good thrillers, or hell, I'll even take some romances for February, please leave your recommendations in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next month in the reading room.